No human can beat my AI. CEO mocked. Black Maid's daughter did, leaving the entire room in shock. The polished marble floor of the Cross Industries headquarters gleamed under the bright studio lights as cameras from every major news network focused on the man standing behind the sleek podium. Damien Cross, CEO of the world's most powerful tech company, adjusted his expensive tie and flashed the kind of smile that had graced magazine covers for the past decade. Ladies and gentlemen, his voice boomed through the packed auditorium. Today marks a historic moment in human history. The audience of journalists, tech experts, and investors leaned forward in their seats. Behind Damien, a massive screen displayed the logo of his latest creation, Nexus AI, the artificial intelligence system that had already revolutionized 3 industries in just 6 months. For too long, humanity has believed itself to be the pinnacle of strategic thinking. Damien continued, his eyes gleaming with an almost predatory confidence. Chess grandmasters, military strategists, economic forecasters, they all pale in comparison to what true intelligence can achieve. He paused dramatically, letting the tension build in the room. That's why today, I'm announcing the Nexus Challenge. $10 million to anyone, and I mean anyone who can defeat my AI in a game of strategic warfare. The rules are simple. It's a complex strategy game that combines elements of chess, economic planning, and military tactics. You have 2 hours. Nexus has never lost. Not once. A reporter in the front row raised her hand eagerly. Mr. Cross, are you saying no human can possibly win? Damien's laugh echoed through the auditorium, cold and dismissive. I'm not just saying it, I'm guaranteeing it. This challenge isn't about finding a winner. It's about proving once and for all that human intelligence has reached its limits. Nexus represents evolution beyond biological constraints. Another journalist called out. What makes you so confident, sir? Because, Damien's voice dropped to almost a whisper, forcing everyone to strain to listen. I've seen Nexus calculate 1,000 possible moves while a human is still deciding whether to move a single piece. I've watched it predict market crashes 6 months in advance. I've seen it solve problems that teams of PhD scientists couldn't crack in years, and it does it in minutes. The room buzzed with excitement and skepticism in equal measure. The competition will be held in 3 weeks, broadcast live to the entire world. Registration opens tonight at midnight. Bring your best minds, your chess champions, your military geniuses, your computer scientists. He spread his arms wide, his smile turning almost mocking. Bring them all. It won't matter. What we're witnessing today is the end of human intellectual supremacy. As the press conference erupted into a frenzy of questions and camera flashes, something entirely different was happening 30 miles away, in the shadows of Damien Cross's private mansion. The mansion itself was a monument to excess 47 rooms, marble imported from Italy, and technology so advanced it seemed pulled from science fiction. But in the servants' quarters, tucked away from the grandeur, lived people whose existence Damien barely acknowledged. Maria Santos pushed her cleaning cart down the hallway, her weathered hands gripping the handle as she watched the press conference on her phone. At 43, she had been cleaning the Cross mansion for 8 years, invisible to the man who employed her. Her English carried the soft accent of her homeland, Guatemala, though she understood far more than most people assumed. Beside her, moving with the quiet efficiency of someone who had learned to be unseen, was her 11-year-old daughter, Amara. The girl's dark eyes were fixed intently on the small phone screen, watching every word that came from Damien Cross's mouth. Mija, Maria whispered. We need to clean the office before he returns. But Amara didn't move. Something about the CEO's arrogant words had ignited something inside her chest, a burning feeling she couldn't quite name. It wasn't anger, exactly. It was something deeper. Something that made her small hands clench into fists. $10 million, she murmured to herself. Amara, come on. We can't be caught watching this. The girl finally looked up at her mother, and Maria was startled by the intensity she saw there. Mama, did you hear what he said? He thinks no human can beat his computer. That's not our concern, Mija. We have work to do. As they moved through the mansion's east wing, Amara's mind raced. She had been in this house almost every day for 3 years, ever since her mother couldn't afford after-school care. She had seen things, heard things, learned things that no one knew she was learning. In Damien's home office, as Maria dusted the expensive furniture, Amara found herself staring at the wall of monitors that dominated one corner. Even when turned off, they seemed to hum with potential, like sleeping giants waiting to wake. "He throws away so much," she said quietly. "What was that, Mija?" "Nothing, Mama." But it wasn't nothing. In the past year, Amara had watched Damien Cross discard laptops that just needed minor repairs, tablets with cracked screens but perfectly functional processors, and most interesting of all, data drives filled with code and notes that he considered outdated or useless. What he didn't know was that every Tuesday, when the trash was collected, Amara had been quietly rescuing these digital treasures. In the tiny apartment she shared with her mother, hidden under her bed, was a collection of technology that would have amazed most adults. "Mama," Amara said as they finished cleaning the office, "do you think he's right? About humans not being smart enough?" Maria paused in her dusting, looking at her daughter with concern. "Why do you ask such things?" I think he's wrong. I think he's very, very wrong." As they left the office, neither of them noticed the small notebook that had fallen from Damien's desk, a notebook filled with handwritten observations about Nexus's behavioral patterns, its decision-making processes, and most importantly, its weaknesses. The notebook lay forgotten under the desk, waiting. That evening, as news of the Nexus Challenge spread across every social media platform and dominated every news cycle, the world began to buzz with excitement. Professional gamers started training. Chess grandmasters analyzed strategy games. Computer scientists formed teams to tackle the challenge. But in a tiny apartment above a bodega in East LA, an 11-year-old girl sat on her bed, surrounded by rescue technology, her eyes burning with a determination that would have shocked anyone who thought they knew her. $10 million, she whispered to herself again. But it wasn't really about the money. It was about something much more important. It was about proving that being underestimated was the greatest advantage of all. As the city lights twinkled beyond her small window, Amara Santos began to plan. She had 3 weeks, a collection of discarded technology, and most importantly, she had been watching. She had been learning. And she had been preparing for this moment without even knowing it. The Nexus Challenge was about to meet its most unexpected competitor. But first, she had to figure out how to enter a competition that required registration, identification, and credibility, none of which an 11-year-old maid's daughter was supposed to possess. The game was about to begin, and nobody suspected that the most dangerous player was just getting started. 3 days after the announcement, while the world buzzed with excitement about the Nexus Challenge, Amara Santos crept through the Cross Mansion at 2:47 a.m. The house slept around her, its smart systems dimmed to night mode, casting everything in a blue-tinted glow that made her feel like she was swimming through an electronic ocean. In her small hands, she carried the notebook she'd found under Damien's desk. Her heart hammered as she made her way to what she privately called her laboratory, a forgotten storage room in the mansion's basement where old furniture went to die. Over the past 18 months, this dusty room had become her secret world. Against one wall stood a makeshift desk cobbled together from a discarded door and 2 filing cabinets. On it sat her collection, 7 rescued laptops in various states of repair, 4 tablets with cracked screens but functioning hearts, and dozens of data drives that Damien Cross had tossed away like candy wrappers. "He thinks broken means worthless," she whispered to herself, powering up her favorite laptop, a sleek machine that had been discarded simply because its battery wouldn't hold a charge. "But broken just means nobody else wants it." Amara had taught herself to code the way other kids learned to ride bikes, through trial, error, and stubborn determination. When the mansion's Wi-Fi couldn't reach the basement, she'd figured out how to boost the signal using parts from an old router. When she needed software, she'd learned to write her own. But her real education had come from the data drives. Each one was like finding buried treasure. She plugged in the newest drive, one she'd rescued just yesterday from Damien's office trash. As files populated her screen, her eyes widened. This wasn't just code. This was Nexus. "Oh my God!" she breathed, scrolling through thousands of lines of programming. "This is how you think." For the next 3 hours, Amara dove into the digital mind of the AI that had never lost. She saw its decision trees, its probability calculations, its pattern recognition algorithms. More importantly, she began to see something else, something that made her pulse quicken with excitement. The AI wasn't as perfect as Damien believed. She opened the notebook she'd found and compared its handwritten observations with the code. Damien had documented some unusual behaviors, moments where Nexus made suboptimal moves, situations where it seemed to hesitate. He dismissed these as minor glitches, but Amara saw something different. "You're not hesitating," she murmured, tracing a line of code with her finger. "You're being careful. Too careful." By dawn, she had mapped 17 different scenarios where Nexus's programming would make it overly cautious. The AI was built to never lose, which meant it would always choose the safest path, even when a riskier move might lead to faster victory. "Mija, what are you doing down here?" Amara spun around to find her mother standing in the doorway, still in her work uniform from the night cleaning shift at the hospital. Maria's eyes took in the elaborate setup, the computers, the cables, the walls covered with papers filled with diagrams and code. "I can explain, Mama." "Explain what?" "That my 11-year-old daughter has been running some kind of computer laboratory in a rich man's basement." Maria stepped closer, her voice a mixture of fear and amazement. "Where did you get all this?" "From the trash," Amara said honestly. "Mr. Cross throws away more technology in a month than most people see in their lifetime. I just fixed it." Maria picked up one of the notebooks, filled with Amara's neat handwriting. The equations and diagrams might as well have been hieroglyphics to her. "And you understand all this?" "I taught myself. YouTube, library books, trial and error." Amara's voice grew stronger. "Mama, I know how his AI works. I know how it thinks, and more importantly, I know how it doesn't think. This is dangerous, Mija. If Mr. Cross finds out you've been taking things, he threw them away." And besides, Amara pulled up a video of the press conference on her laptop. "He said anyone could enter the challenge." Anyone. The realization hit Maria like a physical blow. "No. Absolutely not. You are not entering that competition." "Why not?" "Because you're 11 years old. Because we clean his house. Because people like us don't compete with people like him." The words hung in the air like a slap. Amara felt something cold and hard settle in her stomach. She looked at her mother, this woman who worked 3 jobs, who cleaned up after people who barely acknowledged her existence, who had never once complained about their tiny apartment, or their second-hand clothes, or the way people looked right through them. "Maybe that's exactly why I should," Amara said quietly. Over the following weeks, as the world watched grandmasters and tech geniuses register for the Nexus Challenge, Amara worked with a focus that would have impressed any adult. She reverse-engineered Nexus's training data, identifying the patterns it had learned from millions of games. She built her own simulation environment, testing strategies against a simplified version of the AI. Most importantly, she discovered the AI's fatal flaw: it had been trained to never lose, but not necessarily to win quickly. In complex situations, it would choose defensive moves over aggressive ones, buying time to calculate rather than pressing advantages. "It's like a chess player who's so afraid of losing that they never attack," she explained to herself, writing notes in the margins of Damien's notebook. "But what if someone forced it to make quick decisions? What if someone played so aggressively that it couldn't keep up?" 3 nights before the competition, Maria found her daughter asleep over her keyboard, surrounded by energy drink cans and pages of handwritten code. The sight broke her heart and filled her with pride in equal measure. She gently shook Amara awake. "Mija, you have to sleep." Amara looked up, her eyes bright with exhaustion and determination. "I know how to beat it, Mama. I know exactly how to beat it." "And then what? You think they'll just hand a little girl $10 million? It's not about the money anymore. Amara saved her work and closed the laptop. It's about showing him that the people he looks down on, the things he throws away, the minds he ignores, we matter too. As they walked back to their apartment in the pre-dawn darkness, neither of them noticed the small security camera in the mansion's east corridor, the one that had been recording everything. The Cross Industries headquarters had been transformed into something resembling a gladiatorial arena. Giant screens surrounded the main auditorium, streaming the competition to over 2 billion viewers worldwide. The stage itself featured 2 setups, a sleek black workstation for human competitors, and an imposing cylindrical tower that housed Nexus, its blue lights pulsing like a digital heartbeat. Damian Cross stood at the center of it all, basking in the media attention like a man drunk on his own power. Cameras followed his every move as he glad-handed celebrities, tech moguls, and politicians who had flown in to witness what many were calling the ultimate test of human intelligence. "Ladies and gentlemen," the host announced, his voice echoing through the packed auditorium. "We are now 3 hours into the Nexus Challenge, and the results have been decisive." The scoreboard behind him told the story in brutal clarity: Nexus 47, Humans 0. In the VIP section, a Russian chess grandmaster named Viktor Petrov sat with his head in his hands. 20 minutes earlier, he had been convinced he was about to make history. He'd studied strategy games for 30 years, won tournaments across 6 continents, and entered the competition with the confidence of a man who had never met an opponent he couldn't eventually defeat. Nexus had crushed him in 11 minutes. "The AI saw moves I didn't even know existed," he muttered to a reporter. "It was like playing chess against someone who could see the entire game from beginning to end before I'd even moved my first piece." On stage, the next competitor was already falling apart. Dr. Sarah Chin, a computer scientist from MIT who specialized in game theory, stared at her screen in disbelief as Nexus dismantled her carefully planned strategy with surgical precision. "I built algorithms for this," she whispered to herself. "I ran 10,000 simulations. How is it doing this?" In the audience, Damian Cross's laughter boomed over the shocked murmur of the crowd. "Did you really think decades of human innovation could compete with true artificial intelligence?" he called out to the cameras. "Nexus doesn't just play the game, it reinvents it with every move." 12 minutes later, Dr. Chin joined the growing list of defeated competitors. The pattern continued with mechanical inevitability. A former military strategist from the Pentagon lasted 8 minutes. A team of 3 economics professors working together managed 14 minutes before Nexus had systematically destroyed their coordinated approach. Each defeat was broadcast live, each humiliation magnified by the global audience watching humanity's champions fall one by one. By hour 6, even the commentators were running out of ways to describe the massacre. "I'm not sure what's more impressive," one analyst said during a brief break. "Nexus's perfect record, or the fact that it's actually getting faster. Its last 3 victories came in under 7 minutes each." In the mansion 30 miles away, Maria Santos tried to focus on her cleaning duties, but her hands shook every time she glanced at her phone. The live stream showed competitor after competitor being humiliated, and each defeat made her daughter's plan seem more impossible. "Mija, please," she whispered into the empty hallway. "Just watch and learn. Don't do anything foolish." But Amara wasn't watching from home. She was crouched in the mansion's security room, which she discovered was always empty during major events. The head of security was at the competition, leaving his post unmanned. On the wall of monitors, she watched every match with the intensity of a general studying battlefield tactics. "Too aggressive," she murmured as a Brazilian game designer fell to Nexus in 9 minutes. "He tried to outcalculate a computer." She pulled out her notebook, now filled with observations from dozens of matches. Each defeat taught her something new about how Nexus thought, how it adapted, how it crushed different types of opponents. "You're not just winning," she realized, writing furiously. "You're learning from every single match. Getting better. Faster." This was the twist she hadn't expected. Nexus wasn't just playing against each competitor individually, it was evolving with every game, incorporating successful strategies and discarding weaknesses in real time. On her laptop screen, she pulled up her own simulation environment and began making rapid adjustments to her planned approach. "If you're learning from them," she whispered, "then I need to be someone you've never seen before." Back at the competition, the mood had shifted from excitement to something approaching dread. What had begun as a celebration of human ingenuity was becoming a public execution of human pride. "Ladies and gentlemen," the host announced, consulting his notes with barely concealed amazement, "we've now seen 73 consecutive victories for Nexus. The AI has faced chess masters, military strategists, game designers, computer scientists, mathematicians, and even a team of 5 working together. None have lasted longer than 18 minutes. Damien Cross stepped back onto the stage, his smile so wide it looked painful. "I think we can all agree that this demonstration has exceeded even my expectations. Nexus isn't just superior to human intelligence, it's in a completely different category altogether." The crowd applauded, but the sound was hollow, defeated. "However," Damien continued, raising his hand for silence, "we still have one more day of competition scheduled. Registration remains open for anyone brave enough or foolish enough to challenge perfection itself." As the day's competition ended and the cameras finally stopped rolling, exhausted competitors sat in the hotel bar, dissecting their defeats like soldiers discussing lost battles. "It's not just that it's better than us," Dr. Chen said, staring into her drink. "It's that it makes us look like children playing with blocks. The worst part," Viktor Petrov added, "is that I don't think it was even trying. It's like watching a professional athlete play against toddlers." None of them noticed the 11-year-old girl watching the news coverage on a small tablet in the corner of the lobby, her dark eyes burning with determination as she quietly registered for the next day's competition under the name, as, using an email address she'd created months ago and an identity she'd carefully constructed to pass the basic verification requirements. Tomorrow, Nexus would face its most dangerous opponent yet. But first, Amara had to figure out how to get to the competition without her mother finding out. The second day of the Nexus Challenge dawned gray and drizzling, as if the sky itself was mourning humanity's intellectual defeat. Inside the Cross Industries headquarters, the atmosphere was different from the previous day's excitement. Where there had been anticipation, now there was morbid curiosity. The remaining competitors looked like condemned prisoners walking to their execution. Maria Santos arrived at the mansion early, her heart heavy with worry. She hadn't seen Amara since the night before the girl had claimed she was sleeping over at a friend's house to work on a school project. Something felt wrong, but Maria couldn't put her finger on what. As she began her morning routine, she discovered Amara's tablet left open in the basement storage room. The screen showed the Nexus Challenge registration page, with a confirmation email visible. "Thank you for registering. Your competition slot is confirmed for 2:30 p.m., position number 97. Maria's blood turned to ice. She grabbed her phone with shaking hands and called Amara, but it went straight to voicemail. Meanwhile, 30 miles away, Amara Santos stood in the bathroom of a downtown diner, staring at her reflection in the cracked mirror. She had taken 3 buses to get here, using money she'd saved from helping elderly neighbors with their computers. In her backpack were the tools of her rebellion, her rebuilt laptop, printed copies of her analysis, and the notebook filled with Nexus's secrets. But she looked exactly like what she was, an 11-year-old girl in a maid's uniform. "They won't even let you in the building," she whispered to herself. Then, with the kind of determination that had carried her through months of secret study, she added, "Then I'll make them." At 2:15 p.m., the competition hall was buzzing with resigned energy. Damien Cross worked the crowd like a politician, shaking hands and posing for photos with the confidence of a man who had already won 96 straight victories, he told a cluster of reporters. "At this point, we're not even testing Nexus anymore. We're just demonstrating the vast gulf between artificial intelligence and human limitation." The host took the stage and consulted his list. "Our next competitor is registered as A.S. Could A.S. please come forward?" The crowd murmured with mild interest as they looked around for the next lamb to be led to slaughter. Seconds ticked by with no response. "As? Are you here?" Then, from the back of the auditorium, a small voice called out, "Here! I'm here!" Every head turned as a figure made their way down the aisle. At first, people squinted in confusion. Then the whispers started. "Is that? That's just a kid. Someone's little sister must be lost." But Amara Santos walked down that aisle like she owned it, her chin raised, her dark eyes fixed on the stage ahead. The maid's uniform black dress with white apron made her look even younger than her 11 years, but there was something in her posture that made people stop laughing and start staring. Damian Cross watched her approach with growing incredulity. When she reached the stage, he stepped forward, his voice carrying clearly through his wireless microphone. "Excuse me, little girl, but I think you're lost. This is a competition for adults only." Amara looked up at him, this man whose trash had educated her, whose arrogance had motivated her, whose house she'd cleaned without him ever acknowledging her existence. "My name is Amara Santos," she said, her voice steady despite the thousands of eyes watching her. "I registered as I'm here to play your AI." The auditorium erupted. Laughter echoed from every corner, not malicious but disbelieving. Someone shouted, "Where are your parents, honey?" Another voice called out, "This is adorable, but let's get back to the real competition." Damian Cross's face cycled through confusion, amusement, and then annoyance. He recognized something about the girl but couldn't place it. "This is ridiculous. Security, please escort this child back to whoever brought her." "Nobody brought me," Amara said, her voice cutting through the noise. "I came by myself. I studied your AI by myself. And I'm going to beat it by myself." The laughter grew louder, but now it had a cruel edge. In the VIP section, yesterday's defeated competitors shook their heads in sympathy for this deluded child. "Sweetheart," Damian said, his tone patronizing. "Nexus has defeated chess grandmasters, computer scientists, military strategists, people who have dedicated their entire lives to this kind of thinking. What makes you believe you could possibly succeed where they failed?" Amara reached into her backpack and pulled out her battered laptop. As she set it up at the competitor's station, she looked back at Damian with eyes that seemed far older than her years. "Because they were playing your game by your rules," she said simply. "But I know something they don't." "And what's that?" "I know how you really built Nexus. I know what you threw away. And I know that you're not as smart as you think you are." A hush fell over the auditorium. Something in the girl's voice, a quiet certainty that cut through all the laughter and dismissal, made people lean forward in their seats. Damian's smile faltered for just a moment. There was something familiar about this child, something that tickled the back of his memory. The uniform, the confidence despite her size, the way she seemed to know more than she should. "Fine," he said, his voice hardening. "If you want to embarrass yourself in front of 2 billion people, be my guest. But don't expect anyone to go easy on you just because you're a child." Amara's fingers flew over her keyboard as she logged into the competition system. On the giant screens around the auditorium, her profile appeared, age, 11, occupation, student. The crowd's laughter reached a crescendo. Even the commentators couldn't help but chuckle. "Well, folks," one analyst said, "this is certainly unexpected. I'm not sure what this young lady thinks she's going to accomplish, but you have to admire her courage." But in the front row, Maria Santos burst through the security checkpoint, her face pale with terror and pride in equal measure. She had driven like a madwoman to get here, running red lights and abandoning her car in a tow zone. "Mija!" she called out, but Amara didn't turn around. On stage, the competition system finished loading. Nexus's blue lights pulsed with what almost seemed like amusement. The impossible match was about to begin. "Are you ready?" the host asked, still sounding bewildered by the whole situation. Amara looked up at the massive screen showing her tiny figure dwarfed by the technology around her. Then she looked directly into the main camera, knowing that billions of people around the world were watching this moment. "I've been ready my whole life," she said. And with that, the most unlikely battle in the history of artificial intelligence began. The game interface materialized on the screens around the auditorium, a complex strategic battlefield that combined elements of chess, economic warfare, and military tactics. To most observers, it looked like an incomprehensible maze of interconnected systems, resource nodes, and tactical positions. Nexus made its opening move in 3 seconds, a textbook deployment that had proven successful in all 96 previous matches. The AI established defensive positions while simultaneously building economic infrastructure, a strategy that had crushed every opponent who had dared to challenge it. The crowd expected Amara to spend several minutes analyzing the board, perhaps even ask for clarification on the rules. Instead, her small fingers flew across the keyboard with startling speed, and her response appeared almost instantly. "What the hell?" Dr. Chen muttered from the VIP section, leaning forward in her seat. Amara's opening move was unlike anything Nexus had encountered. Instead of building defenses or establishing economic bases, she launched an immediate, seemingly reckless attack on 3 fronts simultaneously. It was the kind of move that should have resulted in catastrophic failure within minutes. Nexus paused. For the first time in its existence, the AI's response took longer than a second. 12 seconds. Then 18 seconds. On the giant screens, viewers could see the AI's processing indicators flickering with unusual activity. "That's interesting," Viktor Petrov said quietly. "The AI is actually thinking." Damian Cross felt the first flutter of unease in his chest, but he pushed it down. "Cute trick, kid. But Nexus is just analyzing your amateur move. It'll crush you in the next round." But when Nexus finally responded, something was wrong. The AI's move was technically correct, but it was overly cautious, exactly the weakness Amara had identified in her months of secret study. She smiled for the first time since taking the stage. "You're scared," she whispered to the AI, loud enough for the nearby microphones to pick up. "You don't know what I'm doing, so you're playing it safe." Her next move was even more aggressive. She sacrificed an entire battalion to open up an economic pathway that shouldn't have been possible. Every expert in the audience knew it was a terrible trade. She was giving up immediate tactical strength for uncertain future gains. Nexus's processing time stretched to 34 seconds. Then 51 seconds. "This is impossible," Damien said, his voice rising. "The AI should be ending this right now. She's making objectively bad moves." But Amara wasn't making bad moves, she was making moves that had never been tried before. Every strategy Nexus had learned from its training data, every pattern it had identified from defeating human opponents, was suddenly useless. She was playing a game the eye had never seen. 15 minutes into the match, the unthinkable happened. Nexus made a mistake. It was a small error, barely noticeable to casual observers, but every expert in the room saw it. The AI moved a resource convoy into a position that could be exploited 3 moves later, something that should have been impossible for a system that calculated thousands of moves ahead. "Did Nexus just..." Dr. Chen started to say, then stopped, unable to finish the sentence. Amara saw the opening and struck with surgical precision. Her counterattack wasn't just effective, it was brilliant. She turned the AI's own defensive strategy against it, using Nexus's caution to create a trap that the AI couldn't see until it was too late. The auditorium fell silent except for the rapid clicking of Amara's keyboard and the increasing hum of Nexus's processors as they worked harder and harder to keep up. "This isn't possible," Damien said, his voice barely controlled. "Nexus doesn't make mistakes. It doesn't hesitate. It doesn't lose." But on the screens above, the impossible was happening. For the first time in its existence, Nexus was losing. 25 minutes into the match, Amara had systematically dismantled the AI's defensive positions and established economic superiority. Nexus's processing times were now stretching to nearly 10 seconds per move, an eternity in AI terms. "She's doing it," Maria whispered from the front row, tears streaming down her face. "My baby is actually doing it." But Damien Cross had seen enough. His face red with fury and disbelief, he stormed toward the competition controls. "This is fixed," he shouted. "This is some kind of hack." There's no way a child can beat Nexus. Security moved to intercept him, but he was the CEO, their boss. They hesitated just long enough for him to reach the competition panel. I'm calling a system diagnostic, he announced to the crowd. This match is suspended until we can verify that Nexus hasn't been tampered with. No! Amara's voice cut across the auditorium like a blade. She stood up from her station, her small frame somehow commanding the attention of thousands. You said anyone could enter. You said Nexus had never lost. You said it was impossible for a human to win. Well, I'm winning, and you can't change the rules just because you don't like the results. The crowd erupted. Some people were cheering for the little girl who was making history. Others were shouting protests about the irregularity of the situation. But everyone was watching, everyone was invested, and everyone knew they were witnessing something unprecedented. The match continues, the host declared, stepping between Damien and the controls. Mr. Cross, you established the rules of this competition. A.S. has violated none of them. Damien's face was a mask of rage and humiliation, but he was trapped by his own arrogance. In front of 2 billion viewers, he couldn't admit that his unbeatable AI was being defeated by an 11-year-old child. Amara returned to her keyboard, her confidence growing with each move. Nexus was struggling now, its responses becoming increasingly desperate. The AI that had dominated every previous opponent was learning what it felt like to be outplayed. At the 40-minute mark, Amara delivered the final blow. With a series of moves so elegant and unexpected that even Nexus couldn't predict them, she achieved total victory. The words appeared on every screen in the auditorium. Game over. Winner as. For a moment, the silence was absolute. Then the roar began, a sound like thunder that seemed to shake the building itself. Amara Santos, 11 years old, wearing a maid's uniform, had done the impossible. She had beaten Nexus. As confetti fell from the ceiling and cameras flashed like lightning, Amara looked up at Damien Cross. The man who had never noticed her, who had thrown away the very technology she'd used to defeat him, who had bet everything on the supremacy of his creation. I told you, she said simply. You're not as smart as you think you are. The celebration in the auditorium was deafening, but Amara Santos stood in the eye of the storm with a calm that belied her 11 years. As reporters surged forward and cameras flashed around her, she pulled out the worn notebook she'd carried from Damien's office, the one filled with his handwritten observations about Nexus's weaknesses. Before everyone gets too excited, she said, her voice somehow carrying over the chaos. There's something you all need to know about this competition. Damien Cross, still reeling from his humiliation, felt ice water flood his veins as he saw the notebook in her hands. He recognized it immediately, the private documentation of Nexus's flaws that he'd thought was safely discarded. That's private property, he shouted, pushing through the crowd toward the stage. Security! That child has stolen confidential documents. But Amara was already speaking into the microphones thrust toward her face. My name is Amara Santos. My mother cleans Mr. Cross's house. For 3 years, I've watched him throw away perfectly good technology computers, tablets, hard drives full of code and data that he considered worthless. She held up the notebook for the cameras to see. Including this. His own notes about the problems with Nexus. The weaknesses he knew existed but never fixed because he was too arrogant to admit his AI wasn't perfect. The crowd fell silent as the implications sank in. Dr. Chen grabbed the notebook from Amara's hands, her eyes scanning the pages with growing amazement and horror. These are detailed analyses of behavioral anomalies, she called out to the audience. Pattern recognition failures, decision tree errors, overcautious responses in complex scenarios. Mr. Cross knew about all of this. Viktor Petrov joined her, reading over her shoulder. This note here, Nexus shows 23% performance degradation when faced with unprecedented aggressive strategies. He knew exactly how to beat his own AI. That's impossible, Damien protested, but his voice cracked with desperation. Those are just theoretical observations. Minor glitches that don't affect performance. Amara pulled out her rebuilt laptop and connected it to the auditorium's display system. Then explain this, she said, opening a folder filled with video files. I've been recording myself beating Nexus simulations for weeks using the exact strategies I used today. Every strategy is based on weaknesses documented in your own notes. The giant screens lit up with footage of Amara in her basement laboratory, defeating simplified versions of Nexus again and again. Each victory used the same aggressive, unpredictable tactics that had worked in the actual competition. But that's not the worst part. Amara continued, her voice growing stronger as she sensed the mood of the crowd shifting. Show them the training data. Dr. Chen, now fully on Amara's side, accessed Nexus's core files using credentials she'd been given as a potential consultant. What she found made her gasp audibly. The AI was trained specifically to lose against certain player profiles. She announced to the stunned audience. Look at this code, it's programmed to make deliberate mistakes when facing opponents with specific characteristics. The evidence was damning. Hidden deep in Nexus's programming were instructions to throw matches against competitors who fit particular criteria: rival tech CEOs, government officials, specific journalists who had criticized cross-industries. You rigged your own competition, Viktor Petrov said, his voice thick with disgust. You made Nexus unbeatable against regular people so you could humiliate genuine experts, but you built in backdoors for people you wanted to let win. Damien Cross's face had gone from red to ashen white. This is corporate espionage. This child has hacked into classified systems. I didn't hack anything, Amara said calmly. I used the trash you threw away and the notes you left lying around. Everything I learned came from things you didn't think were worth keeping. The reality of the situation was becoming clear to everyone in the auditorium. The world's most celebrated AI wasn't the pinnacle of human achievement, it was an elaborate fraud designed to make Damien Cross look like a genius while secretly allowing him to control who won and lost. The real tragedy, Amara continued, is that Nexus actually is incredibly advanced. Without the rigged programming, without the artificial limitations, it could have been genuinely revolutionary. Instead, you turned it into a puppet show to feed your own ego. As federal investigators who had been watching the live stream began arriving at the auditorium, Amara's mother finally reached the stage. Maria Santos swept her daughter into a fierce hug, tears of pride and terror streaming down her face. Mija, what have you done? She whispered. I showed them that being invisible doesn't mean being powerless, Amara replied. In the following hours, as journalists dug deeper into the scandal, the full scope of Damien Cross's deception emerged. Cross Industries' stock price crashed. Federal investigations were launched. Competitors who had been humiliated by Nexus filed lawsuits for fraud and emotional distress. But for Amara Santos, the real victory wasn't the $10 million prize money, though it would certainly change her and her mother's lives forever. The real victory was standing on that stage, no longer invisible, no longer dismissed, proving that brilliance could emerge from the most unexpected places. 6 months later, Amara would be featured on the cover of Time magazine as one of the year's most influential people. She would receive scholarship offers from every major university in the world. Tech companies would line up to recruit someone who could see possibilities where others saw only trash. And in a small apartment in East LA, surrounded by the rescue technology that had started it all, she would continue to learn, to grow, and to prove that the most dangerous underestimation in the world is dismissing someone because of where they come from. The maid's daughter had changed everything. And she was just getting started.